Imagine dying and instead of resting in peace or, finding yourself walking toward a warm, welcoming light, you wake up standing in a massive echoing courtroom.
Right, just completely disorienting.
Exactly. And a giant stone scale sits directly in the center of the room. On one side of that balance is a feather, and on the other side of the scale is your actual physical heart.
Your literal heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you are told that if your heart is too heavy with the guilt of your life, a monster with the head of a crocodile, the torso of a lion, and like the hindquarters of a hippopotamus is waiting just a few feet away to eat it and erase you from existence entirely. Welcome to the deep dive.
It is, it's one of the most terrifying and vivid images of the afterlife ever constructed by human beings.
Oh, absolutely.
And it really gets right to the core of universal human reality, because when we are faced with the ultimate unknown of death, and more specifically, when we're faced with the quiet, lingering guilt of our own consciences, we instinctively try to build a defense strategy.
Right, we try to manufacture certainty in a landscape that's otherwise entirely murky.
Exactly. We want to control the outcome.
We want to arrive at whatever threshold lies beyond this life holding like a massive binder of our good deeds, or carrying the perfect set of secret passwords and just drop it on the desk and say, look, I earned my spot here. You have to let me in.
Yeah, that human impulse to self-justify is so strong.
It really is. So today, we are looking at perhaps the most elaborate binder ever created, which is the ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead, and specifically the incredibly famous Papyrus of Ani.
Which is just a fascinating artifact.
It is, and our sources for this exploration form this really fascinating stack of academic, Egyptological, and theological analyses. But here's the critical part. We aren't just looking at ancient history for history's sake.
No, not at all. We're actually looking at a profound theological collision. The authors of our source material have provided this deliberate canonical analysis of how the biblical texts offer a radical critique of the theology found in the Book of the Dead.
Which is such an interesting way to approach it.
It is, because looking at what ancient, highly sophisticated cultures believed about the afterlife, well, it acts as a high contrast background. It illuminates the contours of human religious striving in a way that makes biblical grace shine incredibly bright.
And that's really the mission for this deep dive. We want to explore that exact contrast. We want to see how comparing this ancient system of, magic and self-justification and cosmic management with the biblical gospel dramatically deepens your understanding of grace.
It really reframes everything.
Yeah. The goal is that by the end of this, the uniqueness of the biblical worldview will strengthen your daily devotion to Christ. Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start with the physical text itself.
Right, the Book of the Dead.
Because when people hear Book of the Dead, they almost certainly picture like a dusty, leather-bound grimoire sitting on a dark pedestal, maybe with a cursed lock on it or something.
Yeah, Hollywood has definitely skewed our perception of that. It's actually a massive misconception. The Book of the Dead isn't a single bound book, and there is no standard edition. The ancient Egyptians actually called it the spells for going forth by day.
Spells for going forth by day. I love that.
Yeah, it was a highly fluid, ever-evolving corpus of mortuary texts. To really grasp what we're dealing with, we have to trace its evolution, which our sources break down into three major historical phases. It's essentially the story of how the afterlife became democratized over thousands of years.
Okay, let's walk through that democratization. Because if you lived in the Old Kingdom, so around 2500 BCE, your prospects for the afterlife were pretty bleak, unless you were the guy at the absolute top of the pyramid, literally.
Literally at the top, yes. In the Old Kingdom, we have what are known as the pyramid texts. These were elaborate spells and incantations carved directly into the stone walls of the inner burial chambers of pyramids, such as the Pyramid of Unas.
Oh, wow. So just carved right into the stone.
Exactly. But they were strictly, exclusively for royalty. The theology of the time dictated that only the king was semi-divine. Only the king was believed to ascend to the gods, join the solar bark of the sun god Ra, and help maintain cosmic order in the afterlife.
So if you were just like a regular farmer or even a moderately wealthy merchant in the Old Kingdom, you didn't get these spells. You were essentially relegated to hovering in the shadows of the underworld, entirely dependent on the king's success.
Yeah, it was a highly centralized monopoly on eternity.
That is just wild to think about.
It was, but, as human societies evolve, wealth and power tend to disperse. Moving into the Middle Kingdom, roughly 2000 BCE, we see the emergence of the coffin texts.
Okay, so a shift from pyramid walls to actual coffins.
Right. The exclusive royal privilege begins to crack. Elites, high-ranking regional officials, and wealthy individuals who weren't pharaohs started having these spells painted on the insides of their wooden coffins.
So the geography of the afterlife was expanding to include the nobility.
Yes. And that trajectory continued until we hit the New Kingdom around 1550 BCE, which is where we arrive at the Book of the Dead proper.
So this is the era of full democratization. Meaning, if you could scrape together the funds to pay a skilled scribe to write out these spells on a papyrus scroll, you could take that scroll with you into your tomb. Eternity was available for purchase.
Exactly. And our primary anchor for this discussion, the Papyrus of Ani, is a product of this era. It dates to roughly 1250 BCE during the 19th dynasty.
And it was commissioned for a guy named Ani, right?
Yes, Ani, who is a royal scribe, and his wife, Tutu. It is an astonishing artifact. It's an incredibly pristine, beautifully illustrated roll of papyrus that stretches over 78 feet long.
78 feet, that's massive.
It is. It's packed with these spells and vivid, full-color vignettes. But our sources emphasize a crucial point here. Just because it was democratized to anyone who could afford it doesn't mean it was simple folk magic.
Right.
This is elite, mature, highly complex priestly theology. It's making profound truth claims about the fundamental nature of the universe.
And the very first truth claim it makes presents a massive contrast with the biblical worldview. When you read spells 15 and 17 in the papyrus, which lay out the Egyptian theology of creation, you are struck by a sense of overwhelming anxiety.
Yes, anxiety is the perfect word for it.
The Egyptian cosmos is incredibly fragile.
Fragility is the defining characteristic of their universe. What's fascinating here is how alien their concept of creation is to the modern, particularly Western mind.
How so?
Well, the Egyptian mind didn't conceive of a single definitive act of creation, ex nihilo, meaning creation out of nothing, by a god who stands completely outside of time and space.
Right, like we see in Genesis.
Exactly. Instead, they viewed creation as a cyclical, perpetual struggle against the primeval waters of chaos. They called this watery abyss Nu.
Okay, let me push back on that for a second. Because my immediate question, and I'm sure the question of anyone listening, is, if the gods emerged out of this watery abyss, who or what created the water?
That's a very logical question.
Did the Egyptians just not care about the ultimate origin of the chaos itself?
They didn't view it as something that needed to be created. Nu was simply the default eternal state of non-existence and unlimited potential. It was formless, dark, and infinite.
Oh, I see.
The gods, like the sun god Ra or the creator god Idum, literally emerge from within this primordial matter. They are inside the system. They're a product of the universe, not the authors of it.
Wow. And because they are part of the system, their primary agonizing job is to maintain something called ma'at.
Yes, ma'at.
That is arguably the most important word in this entire deep dive. It's usually translated as truth or justice, right? But our sources explain that it's much bigger than just moral behavior. It's cosmic balance.
It's the fundamental architectural order of reality. It encompasses everything.
Like what kind of things?
Ma'at is the order of nature, the reliable cycle of the sun, the annual flooding rhythm of the Nile River, which gave them life, and the hierarchical structure of human society.
So it's everything working the way it's supposed to work.
Exactly. But the terror of the Egyptian worldview is that Ma'at is not permanent. It is not secure. It's constantly, relentlessly threatened by the original chaos.
And the chaos is often personified in their mythology as a giant, terrifying serpent, right, named Apep.
Yes, Apep. He tries to devour the sun god's boat every single night as it travels through the underworld. The gods have to fight this literal war every 24 hours just to ensure the sun rises again.
So if I'm understanding this correctly, the Egyptian worldview is like watching a frantic performer in a circus act, keeping a dozen plates spinning on long, thin poles.
That's a great analogy.
If the gods drop a single plate, if the temple priests stop performing the daily rituals, if the spells in the Book of the Dead aren't recited perfectly, the whole fragile bubble of the universe pops and crashes back into the watery chaos.
That is the exact psychological reality of their religion. The burden of maintaining existence itself is shared by the exhausted gods in the heavens and the anxious humans performing rituals on earth.
There is no concept of once-and-for-all security.
None. Every sunrise is a narrow victory that must be won again tomorrow.
Which brings us to the first sharp, deliberate biblical critique highlighted by our sources. They compare spell 15 from the papyrus of Ani, which is this beautiful, soaring cosmic hymn praising the sun god Ra, with Psalm 104 from the Bible.
And if you just read them casually side by side, they might look like they're doing the same thing.
Yeah, on the surface, the poetic parallels are striking. They're both exalted hymns praising a deity associated with light, the sky, and the sustenance of nature.
Right. They both marvel at how the deity provides for the animals and brings forth the day. But beneath that poetic surface, the theological rupture is absolute.
The underlying mechanics of the universe are completely different. In Psalm 104, and fundamentally going back to Genesis 1, the God of the Bible doesn't emerge from the chaos. He isn't desperately fighting a giant serpent to keep the sun in the sky.
He creates the order by his sovereign word alone from completely outside the system. The chaos isn't a threat to him, it's just raw material waiting for his command.
The biblical God is not a co-maintainer of a fragile equilibrium. He is the absolute sovereign over all matter.
Exactly. Look at the language of Genesis 1. The waters of chaos, the deep, aren't an opposing force threatening to unseat him. The Spirit of God simply hovers over the face of the waters. He speaks, and the elements obey instantly.
Right. In the Egyptian hymns, order is something that must be constantly, anxiously asserted and defended through magic. In the Bible, cosmic order is a free, secure gift from an unthreatened creator. Think about the devotional implication of that for you as a listener. When you bow your head to pray, you aren't reciting a magical incantation designed to hold the fabric of the universe together.
No, you aren't trying to coerce a tired, embattled deity into keeping the sun burning for one more day.
You are resting in a creator who has already definitively secured the cosmos. Your existence, your breath, the ground beneath your feet, it isn't a fragile spinning plate. It is held firmly in the hands of someone who cannot be overthrown.
It's meant to shift the entire posture of the human heart from cosmic anxiety to deep, abiding trust.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
But if the physical cosmos in the Egyptian mind is fragile, the human soul facing judgment is in infinitely more danger.
Oh, absolutely. Let's move into the courtroom. Let's talk about the burden of the scales. This centers on probably the most famous, most reproduced image in all of Egyptian mythology, which is spell 125, the weighing of the heart.
We touched on this in the hook, but let's really set the scene because the psychological weight of this ritual is staggering.
The scene takes place in what is called the Hall of Double Truth. This is the ultimate judicial center of the afterlife. Ale, our deceased scribe, is led into this massive, intimidating hall by Anubis, the jackal-headed god of mummification and the dead.
And there, sitting in judgment, is Osiris, the lord of the underworld.
And right in the center of the room is that giant balance scale. On one side of the scale, resting perfectly on the tray, is the feather of Ma'at. That's the physical embodiment of the cosmic truth and perfection we just talked about. And on the other tray is Ani's heart. The Egyptians called it the Ibe. And I want to dig into that because to the Egyptians, the heart wasn't just a biological pump moving blood around. It was much, much more than that.
Oh, the physiological beliefs of the Egyptians are crucial to understanding this spell. During the mummification process, they actually discarded the brain.
Which is so crazy to think about.
Yeah, they would pull it out through the nose with hooks and throw it away. They thought it was essentially useless stuffing.
Wow.
But the heart was treated with the utmost reverence. It was carefully preserved inside the body cavity, often wrapped separately.
Why heart?
Because they believed the heart was the absolute center of intellect, of memory, of emotion, and crucially, of moral agency. It was the hard drive that recorded every single ethical choice you ever made.
Your entire moral history is locked in that muscle. And in this divine courtroom, your hard drive is literally weighed against the perfection of the universe.
Sure.
And just to add an unbearable amount of pressure to the situation, Thoth, the ibis-headed god of wisdom and writing, is standing right next to the scale with a scribe's palette. He's ready to record the exact, unalterable result of the weighing.
No pressure.
Yeah. And sitting right under the scales, staring up at Ani's heart, is Amit, the devourer of the dead.
As you described earlier, she's a terrifying composite of the ancient world's most dangerous predators: crocodile, lion, hippopotamus. If your heart is heavy with sin, if the scales do not balance perfectly with the feather of Ma'at, the judgment is immediate.
Amit eats your heart.
Amit eats your heart. And we have to be clear about what that means. You aren't sent to a fiery underworld for a process of eternal conscious torment. You are annihilated.
You suffer the second death. You simply cease to exist in any form forever.
The stakes could not possibly be higher. And as if facing a crocodile lion monster wasn't bad enough, Ani doesn't just get to stand there silently while the scale does the work.
No, he has to actively face the 42 assessors. These are 42 terrifying minor gods sitting in rows along the walls of the hall.
Yeah.
And they have incredibly intimidating names like Crusher of Bones, Devourer of Shades, and Eater of Entrails.
Just delightful names.
Yeah, really welcoming. Ani has to stand before them and perform what Egyptologists call the negative confession.
This is an exhausting moral calculus. Ani has to go down the line, address each of the 42 gods by their secret name, and declare his absolute innocence of 42 specific sins.
The text of the papyrus lists them all out. Let me read a few of these because the scope is wild. He has to say things like, I have not stolen, I have not slain men and women, I have not uttered lies.
Right, that covers the big moral categories.
But then it gets incredibly granular. He has to look at these gods and say, I have not stolen grain, I have not stopped the flow of water, I have not multiplied my words in speaking, I have not eavesdropped.
It covers everything from violent capital crimes to subtle social infractions, property disputes, and cultic purity. The system demands that he look the divine realm in the eye and assert that his life was entirely morally flawless.
I have to stop right here because logic dictates a massive problem. No human being, not even a highly educated, wealthy, royal scribe like Ani, has actually lived a perfect life.
Of course not.
They didn't go their entire lives without telling a single lie or losing their temper or eavesdropping on a conversation. They were human. So they absolutely knew they were guilty of at least some of these 42 infractions.
Yeah.
Was this just massive culture-wide denial? Did they actually believe they were perfect?
That's a great point. The sources provide a profound insight into this exact paradox. The ancient Egyptians were acutely aware of their own flaws, but the negative confession is entirely performative, not penitential. It's a legal and magical defense strategy.
Performative, meaning it's essentially a lawyer reciting a plea of not guilty, regardless of the actual evidence. It is a declaration of legal standing, not a true confession of the soul.
Yes, and the reason they had to do this is devastating. In the Egyptian theological system, there is no concept whatsoever of divine mercy.
Wow.
There is no covenant of grace, there is no mechanism for substitutionary atonement, and there is absolutely no concept of the forgiveness of sins.
So it's just pure cold balance.
Exactly. Ma'at is an impersonal, inflexible, cosmic standard. Fire burns, gravity pulls, Ma'at balances. So if you admit guilt, if you say, I did steal grain, the system has no way to forgive you.
The scale tips, and you are destroyed.
Exactly. The system demands that you assert your own righteousness, even if you know for a fact it is a lie. You are attempting to legally and magically override your own moral reality through the sheer power of the spell.
Which brings us to what I think is the most chilling, heartbreaking, and deeply human part of the entire Papyrus of Ani. Because the Egyptians knew they were lying to the 42 assessors.
They did.
They knew their hearts, that biological hard drive held the actual, unvarnished memory of their sins. And they were absolutely terrified that right in the middle of this high-stakes negative confession, their own heart would speak up and betray them to Osiris.
The fear was that the conscience would testify against the deceased in the divine courtroom. They believed the heart had its own agency, and it might blurt out the truth while they were busy claiming perfection.
So their solution to this terrifying problem was spell 30b, the heart scarab. Families would hire craftsmen to carve this specific spell onto a stone amulet shaped like a scarab beetle.
And the choice of the scarab is highly significant.
Oh, why is that?
Well, the scarab beetle was associated with the god Khepri, representing the morning sun, rebirth, and self-creation. They believed the scarab beetle generated life out of nothing, rolling its ball of dung, which they associated with the sun disks.
Okay, yeah, I see.
Placing a scarab on the mummy was a powerful symbol of ensuring rebirth.
They would take this stone scarab and place it directly over the heart inside the mummy's linen wrappings. And the text of spell 30b is a direct, desperate command from the deceased to their own heart.
It's pretty intense.
It says, "O my heart of my existence, do not stand against me as a witness. May there be no opposition from you in the presence of the one who keeps the scales. Do not tell lies about me in the presence of the great God."
It's quite literally a magical gag order placed on the human conscience. The Egyptian solution to the unbearable weight of guilt is to forcibly silence the internal witness.
Because they cannot find forgiveness, so they must resort to suppression.
Exactly. It's the ultimate act of self-justification through magical coercion.
And here's where our sources bring in the full weight of the biblical critique, and the contrast is just staggering. Because the Bible actually agrees completely with the Egyptian intuition that the human heart is the core of the problem.
The scriptural parallels regarding the nature of the heart are striking. Jeremiah 17 explicitly declares that the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately sick. Who can understand it?
The Bible acknowledges that the human moral hard drive is corrupted.
Furthermore, the Apostle Paul in Romans 2 talks extensively about the reality of a final judgment, where the secrets of men will be laid bare, and where the human conscience will actively bear witness, either accusing or excusing them.
So the biblical worldview absolutely affirms that judgment is real, the standard is perfection, and the heart knows its own profound guilt. The diagnosis is essentially the same. The heart is heavy with sin, and judgment is coming.
But the biblical solution is the exact polar opposite of the heart scarab. The Bible doesn't offer a magical spell to gag the conscience. It demands that we let the conscience speak fully and honestly.
It demands true confession, not an Egyptian negative confession where you declare an innocence you don't possess, but a penitential confession where you fully admit your guilt without making excuses.
Our sources point directly to Psalm 51, which is King David's great, agonizing prayer of repentance after his affair with Bathsheba and the murder of her husband.
David doesn't stand before God and say, "I have not slain a man."
No, he does the exact opposite. He says, "Against you, you only, have I sinned and done what is evil in your sight, so that you may be justified in your words and blameless in your judgment."
He exposes his heart entirely to the judge. He drops all his defenses. He agrees with the scales.
He agrees with the scales because in the biblical framework, the judge sitting on the throne is also the redeemer who provides mercy.
Right.
In Egypt, exposure leads inevitably to annihilation. In the Bible, exposure when brought to God in repentance leads to atonement.
Here's where it gets really interesting for you listening right now. We need to bridge the gap between ancient Egypt and today. Because while we might not carve stone beetles to put on our chests, the exhaustion of the negative confession is alive and well.
We still frantically try to silence our internal accuser. We're constantly performing our own modern negative confessions. The human drive for self-justification hasn't changed. Only the technology has.
Exactly. Think about how we use social media. We curate our feeds to present a flawless vignette of our lives, showing only our best parenting moments, our perfect vacations, our most successful achievements.
We're essentially saying to the digital assessors, look at my life, I am balanced, I am worthy.
We build massive resumes. We fiercely point out the moral or political flaws in other people to distract from our own. We use secular spells of therapy speak or self-affirmation to convince ourselves that we are inherently good people and our scales balance. It is utterly exhausting.
It's the relentless burden of having to prove your own worthiness to exist day after day. But the biblical gospel intervenes and says you can stop. You can drop the agonizing act.
You don't have to gag your conscience anymore, because in Egypt, the heart is weighed and judged wanting. But in the Bible, God offers a radically different operation.
Yes, in Ezekiel 36, God says, I will give you a new heart, and a new spirit I will put within you, and I will remove the heart of stone from your flesh and give you a heart of flesh.
The heart isn't merely weighed and threatened, it's fundamentally replaced.
And as we move into the New Testament, our sources highlight the ultimate resolution to the terror of the courtroom. We find that Jesus Christ is both the judge on the throne and the substitute on the altar.
In the Egyptian hall, Ani stands completely alone, frantically defending himself with magic words he bought from a scribe. But in the biblical courtroom, the Christian stands silent, because Christ is their advocate.
You don't have to silence your accuser with a spell, because Jesus answers the accusation with his own blood. The penalty has already been absorbed.
As Paul writes in Romans 8, there is therefore now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. The scales have been satisfied on your behalf.
That assurance provides an infinite psychological relief that a heart scarab could never achieve.
It's the difference between desperately holding your breath and finally being able to exhale. But let's say Ani's heart scarab works. The spell holds, the conscience is gagged, the scales balance, and Amit doesn't eat him. Is he safe?
Not at all.
Because now he has to physically travel through the afterlife to reach paradise, and the geography between the courtroom and the field of reeds is essentially an active spiritual war zone.
Oh, it's brutal. The journey through the Tuat, the Egyptian netherworld, is chronicled in spells 99 through 110 and spells 144 to 153, and it's a nightmare of hostile geography and aggressive bureaucracy.
The Tuat is not a peaceful stroll through the clouds. It's populated by fire-spitting serpents, boiling lakes of fire, wandering executioners, and a dizzying, maddening array of gates, caverns, and pylons.
There are gates everywhere, and every single gate is guarded by these terrifying demonic bouncers. These aren't angels waiting to welcome you home.
They have names intended to inspire absolute dread, like she who repeats slaughter, or he who feeds upon the dead, or eater of the foulness of his hinder parts.
And you can't just politely ask them to step aside and open the door.
No, this relies heavily on what scholars call apotropaic magic. Apotropaic means protective, specifically intended to ward off evil and deflect harm.
To get through these gates, the deceased had to employ a highly technical knowledge-based access theology. You had to know the exact secret name of the gate itself.
You had to know the specific name of the guardian standing in front of it. And you had to recite the precise magical formula without a single mispronunciation.
It's an afterlife entirely dependent on having the right passwords. If you forget a syllable, if the papyrus in your tomb rots and you lose the memory of the spell, the demon destroys you.
And our sources point out a fascinating historical parallel here. This requirement of highly technical, secretive data to achieve salvation closely mirrors the later Gnostic heresies that emerged around the Mediterranean in the early Christian era.
Gnosticism also taught that the material world was hostile and that salvation required secret knowledge gnosis to navigate past hostile spiritual rulers, which they called archons, in order to reach the divine realm.
It elevates technical knowledge over relational trust or moral transformation. It's like trying to get into the most exclusive, dangerous VIP club in the universe, and every bouncer is armed and looking for an excuse to kill you.
You're constantly terrified. Did I memorize the right spell for the 14th gate? What if I mispronounce the name of the guy with the crocodile head? There is zero rest.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of biblical theology, the contrast regarding how we access the divine presence is breathtaking. The Egyptian texts assume that the divine realm is inherently closed off, guarded, and fiercely resistant to human entry.
You're an intruder. You have to force your way in through ritual mastery and esoteric passwords.
But the biblical vision of the afterlife, and specifically the kingdom of God, is the exact opposite. The sources point us to Revelation 21, the great vision of the New Jerusalem descending to earth.
And what does John specifically note about the architecture of that city? He writes, "Its gates will never be shut by day, and there will be no night there."
The gates are never shut. That is a profound theological statement. There's no hostile bureaucracy trying to keep you out. There are no demonic guardians demanding a password.
The threat has been entirely removed by the absolute victory of God over evil.
And even more profoundly, how do you actually get in? It's not a password you memorize. Jesus says in John chapter 10, "I am the door. If anyone enters by me, he will be saved and will go in and out and find pasture."
He doesn't give you a secret formula on a piece of paper to trick a bouncer. He is the good shepherd who willingly lays down his life for the sheep, and he himself is the entrance.
Egyptian theology demands that you build magical fences to protect your soul from constant danger. Jesus lays down his life to create a flock, and safety is found not in defensive isolation or esoteric knowledge, but in shared life and relationship with the shepherd.
When Christ was crucified, the veil in the temple, the massive curtains separating humanity from the Holy of Holies, was torn completely in two, from top to bottom. Access to God's presence was thrown wide open.
Think about how radically that alters how you approach God on a Tuesday morning. You don't need a secret, elevated vocabulary. You don't need a perfect spiritual technique or a specific bodily posture.
You don't need to string the right theological words together like a magical formula to force God to pay attention to you.
Access to God relies entirely on His grace, not on your spiritual competence. You don't need gnosis. You just need to know the shepherd. You can just talk to him.
The burden of access has been completely secured by the Son of God, not by the skill of the scribe.
It's incredibly liberating. But we have to keep moving through the papyrus, because what happens after you navigate all these gates and reach the end of the journey is where the Egyptian view of human destiny gets deeply strange to our modern sensibilities.
Let's look at the contrast between reanimation and resurrection. The texts in question are the transformation spells, specifically spells 76 through 88 and the papyrus of Ani.
These are deeply fascinating from an anthropological perspective. In the Egyptian mind, the ultimate goal wasn't just to survive in a restored human form. They desired to achieve a kind of fluid, mythic mobility.
Right, Ani has a whole arsenal of spells designed to magically transform his soul into all sorts of entities.
He has a spell to become a divine falcon made of gold. He has a spell to turn into a lotus flower, a heron, a swallow.
He can transform into a phoenix, the Bennu bird, which is associated with the sun god. Or he can become an Akh, which translates roughly to a luminous, transfigured spiritual being that dwells among the stars.
Our sources carefully unpack the profound theology operating beneath these spells. This isn't just beautiful symbolic poetry. The Egyptian goal is ontological blending.
They wanted to literally merge with the cosmic order. By becoming the Bennu bird or the golden falcon, they take on the attributes and the immortality of the gods themselves.
And the primary motivation for this ontological blending is to avoid decaying in the grave.
So it's essentially erasing the boundary line between the creator and the creature. It's a survival mechanism. It's saying, my human form is weak and rots, so I'm going to magically become a piece of the divine machinery so I don't disappear.
Correct. But paradoxically, alongside this desire to transcend humanity and become a cosmic bird, you have an intense, almost desperate focus on the physical corpse left behind in the tomb.
This is detailed in spells 21 through 23, which cover the opening of the mouth ceremony.
This was a very real, physical ritual. The priests in the tomb would take specialized iron instruments, often shaped like an adze, and physically touch the mouth, the eyes, and the ears of the mummified corpse, reciting these spells to magically unblock the sensory organs.
The goal of this ceremony was to literally reanimate the corpse so that the mummy, or its spiritual double the Ka, could eat the food offerings left in the tomb, drink water, breathe the air, and speak in the afterlife.
But notice what this reveals about their theology of eternity. It's merely sustained, managed existence. It's repair work. It assumes that the threats of scarcity, hunger, thirst, and physical vulnerability still exist in the next world.
Death is being managed. It is being continuously negotiated with through offerings and magic, but death is never fundamentally defeated.
Let me ask you this, because the contrast here seems massive. If the pinnacle of Egyptian theology is trying to escape death by dissolving your humanity to become a cosmic bird, or by magically propping up a mummified corpse so it can eat physical bread left in a tomb, what exactly is the Bible doing when it talks about life after death?
The Bible utterly rejects both of those Egyptian solutions. It does not offer reanimation of a corpse to continue a life of managing scarcity, and it certainly does not offer mythic transformation into an animal or a star to escape human frailty.
The Bible offers resurrection.
And our sources draw a brilliant shining line here from the Book of the Dead to the Gospel of John, chapter 11, the raising of Lazarus, and to the Apostle Paul's definitive theology of resurrection in 1 Corinthians 15.
When Jesus stands outside the tomb of his friend Lazarus, who has been dead for 4 days, he doesn't bring an iron adze. He doesn't recite an Egyptian spell to open Lazarus' mouth so he can eat a piece of bread in the dark.
No. Jesus makes an earth-shattering claim. He says to Martha, I am the resurrection and the life. It's an identity statement, not a magical incantation.
He doesn't give Lazarus a spell to manage his death. Jesus exerts sovereign, personal, divine authority over death itself. He simply commands, Lazarus, come out, and the dead man walks out.
And as Paul expands upon this in 1 Corinthians 15, he insists that biblical resurrection is a historical, bodily, permanent defeat of death. It is the end of the era of death entirely. As Paul writes, the last enemy to be destroyed is death.
And the Christian hope isn't that we will evolve into minor gods or merge into the universal energy of the cosmos, losing our distinct identity.
That's the crux of the difference. Egyptian theology is ultimately about humans trying to ascend and become divine in order to escape the vulnerability of their humanity.
The biblical gospel is the exact inverse. It's about God descending the doctrine of the incarnation to dwell with humanity, taking on our vulnerability in order to redeem our humanity.
In the biblical resurrection, a human being does not become an angel or a falcon. They remain a fully distinct, recognizable human being. But they are glorified, made imperishable, and freed from the curse of sin.
We don't have to become a phoenix to live forever. God likes humans. He created us to be humans, and he redeems us to be perfect humans.
As the sources point out so beautifully, looking again at Revelation 21, the ultimate goal of history is not humans escaping Earth to become divine in the heavens. The goal is God bringing heaven down to earth to dwell with his people.
The text says, Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. Divine presence replaces human promotion. Death is swallowed up in absolute victory, not bypassed by a magical transformation or managed by tomb offerings.
That is such a crucial grounding distinction for everyone listening to internalize. Our ultimate hope isn't in some endless, exhausting cosmic survival where we just keep farming magical wheat in the field of reeds forever.
And our hope isn't in losing our identity by becoming a nameless drop in the ocean of the universe. Our hope is a physical, embodied, tactile new creation where death, sorrow, and pain are entirely abolished, and where we see God face to face as fully restored human beings.
It profoundly changes how you view the dignity of your own physical body, how you view your own future, and how you process the agonizing reality of grief when you lose someone you love. You mourn, but not as those who have no hope.
Which brings us to our final synthesis. We've looked at the cosmos, the courtroom, the gates, and the tomb.
If we bring all these thematic threads together, the contrast couldn't be starker. Egypt offers a fragile creation that must be anxiously maintained by human effort. The Bible offers a secure creation governed by a sovereign, unthreatened Lord.
Egypt offers salvation through mastering secret technical knowledge. The Bible offers salvation through trusting in God's self-revealing, unmerited grace.
Egypt offers a gagged, silenced, suppressed conscience. The Bible offers a fully cleansed, forgiven, and liberated conscience.
Egypt offers a managed death. The Bible offers a defeated death. So what does this all mean for us today?
This raises an important question for every single one of us about the unavoidable reality of our own mortality. In the Egyptian theological system, the moment of death is a moment of intense, paralyzing terror where you must be armed to the teeth.
You need a massive library of spells, stone amulets, legal maneuvers, and self-defense strategies to survive the transition. You die frantically clutching your own performance and your own preparations.
But the Christian is invited to die entirely differently. Our sources highlight this profound, beautiful contrast to close out their analysis. Because Christ has already faced the judgment of the scales on the cross, because he has already navigated the darkness and defeated death itself in the resurrection, the Christian doesn't need to memorize a single spell for the end of their life.
The sources refer to it as the ultimate anti-spell. It is found in the final words of Jesus on the cross and echoed by the words of Stephen, the first Christian martyr, as he was dying. Father, into your hands I commit my spirit.
Into your hands I commit my spirit. Just absolute surrender.
It's the complete and total surrender of control. It's trusting a person, a loving Father, rather than trusting a magical procedure.
When a Christian faces death, they aren't defending themselves. They're resting entirely in the defense that Christ has already provided. They aren't asserting their righteousness. They are relying on his.
I want you, listening right now, to really let that sink into your bones. The goal of this deep dive was to deepen your love for Christ, and I think this is where the rubber meets the road. Let go of your internal heart scarab.
You don't need to fake your righteousness before God anymore. You don't need to construct a flawless resume to present at the gates of eternity. You don't need to hide your failures.
Knowing that the judgment you fear has already fallen entirely upon Jesus Christ allows you to face God right now, today, with total unvarnished honesty and with overwhelming gratitude. You can lay down the heavy, exhausting burden of proving your own worth.
It's the magnificent transition from agonizing religious fear to profound, joyful rest.
We have covered massive ground today. We've walked from the terrifying scales of Mata and the closed, demon-guarded gates of the Egyptian underworld, all the way to the open doors of biblical grace, the absolute forgiveness of the cross, and the finality of the physical resurrection.
It's a journey from the very peak of human religious striving to the stunning reality of divine provision.
And I want to leave you with a final, challenging thought, built right out of this source material. We look at the papyrus of Ani, and it seems ancient, foreign, maybe a little bizarre. We don't read the Book of the Dead to prepare for our funerals today.
But human nature hasn't changed one bit since Ani unrolled that papyrus 3,000 years ago.
Don't we still try to manufacture our own heart scarabs? Don't we use modern, secular spells of self-justification every single day? We obsessively curate our social media feeds to show only our best moments.
We build up our resumes and our bank accounts to create a fortress of security. We point out the flaws in everyone else's politics or behavior to ensure we look better by comparison.
We do all of this to silence our own internal accuser, to prove to ourselves and to the world that our hearts are perfectly balanced, that we are worthy of love, worthy of existence, worthy of survival.
So here is the question. What would your life look like tomorrow morning if you completely dropped the magic tricks?
If you stop trying to justify yourself, stop trying to spin the plates of your own righteousness, and just rested entirely in the finished historical work of Jesus Christ. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive.
Take that question with you, and we'll see you next time.